Nave cohort, we are back. It's a fine Saturday morning, and we are going to be getting up to our usual Saturday morning Pilum Teaches stream in DCS with the F-4E Phantom 2, and today we're going to be covering the AGM-12 Bullpup missile in all three variants A, B, and C. This is, as usual, an official Pantheon Initiative training video for that kind of thing. At least for the first half hour there or so. Pantheon Initiative fly stronger, and Fenrir Flight break the chains. So let's go ahead and get into the aircraft. We are paused here on our usual training field here at Nellis to deal with some of our old nemesis. Got our usual array of trucks. But while we are in pause, and so I don't have engine noise going on in the background, we're going to go ahead and cover what we've got on board today. Now, we are actually carrying all three variants of the Bullpup missile. On the right outer pylon, we have the AGM-12 Alpha, which is a solid fuel propellant missile. Got the same sort of small warhead there on the front. On the opposite outer pylon, we have the B variant, which is liquid-fueled. Gives it a little bit better impulse and a little bit greater range, but we'll talk about all that here in a minute. And then on the inner pylons, we have the heavier AGM-12C. That has a much larger warhead of about twice the size and greater fuel capacity storage, a little bit heavier, a little bit bigger motor. All of the Bullpup missiles utilize a command guidance called MACLOS, or Manual Command Line of Sight, radio waved system that was developed during the Second World War, but put into practice a little bit later on. So we're going to go ahead and cover what bindings are required here for us today. So we can go under Adjust Controls. And since I have these bound on axes, we're going to come under the axis here. And it's the moving ones there that are the weapon slew forward hand control X and Y axis. And I'm going to unpause here for a moment. You can see the little hand control stick kind of moving back and forth. We'll go and we'll pause that again. The MACLOS guidance there for the AGM-12 Bullpup is very similar to other missiles that are already included in the game, such as one of the RB, I think it's the RB-04 missile for the Viggen, or maybe the RB-05, but uses the same sort of principle with the same sort of result. The weapon system has on its back a couple of bright flares that ignite shortly after the motor does, and the pilot will keep that weapon in his line of sight, using the flares to guide the missile towards the target using the hand control system. Understandably, this is not ideal, and even in something like SACLOS guidance that we see on the Mi-24P Hind with its air-to-ground guided missiles, where all the gunner has to do is keep the target in the crosshair and the weapon will correct itself to get there. The K-50 utilizes a rearward firing, or rearward seeking rather, beam righting laser for its Vickers missile, which operates on a very similar principle to the SACLOS. Basically, you just have to keep the crosshairs on the target, and any commands to get the missile to correct its flight to get there will be transmitted to the weapon. That is not the case with these weapons here. Everything this weapon does is entirely based on the pilot's control inputs. So it does create several vulnerabilities from a historical standpoint, as we cover the history of the weapon and the eventual development away from this to automatic systems like Maverick. If the pilot has to keep the flare in line of sight in order to guide the weapon, that means that the pilot has to be very close to their target, which is bad if it is a well-defended target, like an installation or a convoy with escorts, anything along those lines, because it means you are going to be well within the threat envelope of anybody shooting back at you, whether it's with a shoulder-launched weapon system, or a machine gun, or an autocannon, anything along those lines. You're going to be a pretty stellar target for any of those systems. The other thing too is the best guidance for this weapon system is to be directly behind the weapon. Basically meaning that you've got this bright weapon with a giant smoke plume that's come off the missile rail as it accelerates the weapon up to its speed. And even if the gunner on the ground can't see you, they can see the missile trail. And so what ended up happening in Vietnam with actual practice using these weapons in combat is S-60 and ZU-23 gunners and whatever else would just shoot up the smoke trail. And the odds were pretty good you were probably going to hit the aircraft that was guiding the missile behind it. So what we developed as a tactic in the meanwhile was to fire the weapon and immediately offset from the trail slightly left or slightly right. So that way it is still mostly in front of the aircraft and can be mostly seen, and hopefully guide the weapon onto the target before it shoots you and kills you. Of course, this all gave way to more automatic systems very quickly, which were also developed during the same period as we got to electro-optical guidance with bombs like Walleye or GB-8 for the hobos, or to actual air-to-ground proper missiles like the AGM-65A and B Maverick. So this was their predecessor. So if you're flying historical missions, or eventually when the F-100D comes out, this might be the only weapon system available to you as an air-to-ground missile. It has an advantage of being slightly more standoffish than bombs. And because it's guided, if the target is moving, you can lead it a little bit, subject to the accuracy of the pilot. But of course, all the disadvantages we've already talked about there too. This is a pilot-guided, pilot-steered weapon. The Wizzo cannot help you in any fashion here, especially given that you have to be looking forward to find the flare and use the flare to steer the target. One of the other developments that we eventually got from this one is the GBU-15 bomb with its data link and its electro-optical guidance system, which would allow the Wizzo to steer the weapon in its terminal phase without having to actually see the missile or the bomb fly towards the target. They can use the onboard sensors and data link to look through the seeker head of the weapon and do its thing. So with that, we're going to go ahead and look at our usual adversary here when it comes to training and just trying to put weapons on target. Our field of trucks. Yes, the humble GAZ-66 blown up so many times here in the Nevada desert. But we're going to look to try and put these weapons on target and kill as many of these vehicles as possible. Again, we are carrying all three variants. We're going to use the A model first, followed by the B to get that opposite pylon balanced out, and then we will employ the larger AGM-12C and kind of put that into use. We may not hit these targets today. I'm going to do my dead level best to try and make that reality happen, but the unfortunate thing is because it is a MACLOS guided system, everything that we do is kind of subject to, I think, the weapon's going where it needs to go, and I'm going to try and keep it steered onto the target. All right, let's go ahead and get ourselves unpaused here. We will take off and head towards our target area. And then we will pause again and talk a little bit about how we're going to do what we're going to do today. Good morning, Night Horton Trigger.
Canopy down and locked. Lights out and stripes aligned.
For all the disadvantages that the weapon system has, for its time, it was extremely forward-thinking. The idea of putting a bomb on a rocket and then being able to steer that rocket towards a target was a new concept.
Is this flight going to be treetop? All right. Oh, great. Might need the crew chief to remove the seat cushion from my asshole.
However, manual command guidance was not something that was going to stick around for very long, as we found out all of the limitations with it, plus the pilot workload and all these other things. Real quick, before the ad break hits us here in about 40 seconds, the same steering axis is used to control the seeker head of the Maverick missile, so you don't have to bind extra controls, you just have to remember where the same controls are set up. We got an ad break coming up here in the next handful of seconds, so we're going to be a little quiet here in the next minute and a half or so. But for those of you that are watching on YouTube later or watching without ads because you've done that, you can see the whole taxi and takeoff. Everybody else will probably catch you when we're airborne. Went well last night there, Trigger. It was a good time. Made some progress, but I'm sure the boys will be back at it here soon.
Engine's good. Airspeed's coming alive. 80 knots. 100 knots. Flaps up. Gears moving. Okay, nails. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Gear up. Okay. Steering set for diversion.
Okay, so for everybody coming back from the ad break, we are airborne. Rolling out towards our target area. And we're just doing a steady climb.
All right, those are some nails. 2 o'clock. And, oh, nails. 2 o'clock.
Some of the other limiting factors there, especially with the heavier Bullpup missile, but there is no special rail option for the inner rail Bullpups, is the inability to carry sidewinders in addition to those weapons on the inner pylons. So especially if you're going up to use the heavier weapon system, make sure you got somebody who can help take care of fighters in close. That or get really good with using the Sparrow or the gun, one or the other. As far as weapon settings go, there is a setting on the dial for AGM-12 for the weapon selector, so we're just going to roll on over to that. And these are employed in the direct mode. With the master arm on, pylon should say that it is armed when all conditions are set correctly. Your interval timer does not matter, so you can leave this pre-configured if you're carrying bombs or rockets or anything else on board the jet. The quantity selector I don't believe matters either, depending upon what pylons you've got set up, because you can only guide one Maclos weapon at a time. But just as a matter of good habit, I always set that to 1. The last thing you want to do is to be fussing around with all of those selector settings and forget something like that, or get into a bad habit where it's like, oh, well, I don't need to do this, that, or the other. And then you go up carrying some laser-guided bombs and you end up pickling 2 off at the same time.
Mud, 1 o'clock.
I think we might be able to do something special here with this too, because doing the bullpups themselves is going to take terribly long. So we will make sure that we land at Creech. We'll grab some folding fin aerial rockets, and we'll use those today as well. About 30 miles away from our target area. I do want to go ahead and climb up to about 20,000 feet so we can take a nice good look at this pristine desert that we live in.
Got a new bogey, left 5 degrees, 43 miles, 21,000.
Turn our good old-fashioned autopilot there on. And bump up the time acceleration. Cruising over Mount Charleston there. We are not going, as they say, over the hump to Pahrump. While we will land at Creech later, we won't be getting lost there. Okay, so how we're going to be using these things today. First, we're going to put ourselves into a shallow dive. I tend to use a reticle setting of between 17 and 23 units. I've even had it on 45 if I've been using Mavericks or something else, and I just happen to be carrying Bullpups as well. Again, a lot of that doesn't matter a whole lot because you are going to have to correct the weapon's flight very shortly off the rail, and then continue to steer that weapon down towards the target until you hit it. As far as effective range, it's basically out to your visual range. The better motors on the B model and C model compared to the A, in theory, gives this weapon a little bit of extra range. But since you're trying to track a tiny little flare visually anyway, the whole way in, functionally these weapons have about the same range. It is extremely difficult to keep track of a flare that far out where you can make use of the other system's longer range. So in all cases, you're probably going to be shooting this weapon, I don't know, 2 to 3 nautical miles away at best. Close enough that, you know, you might also consider dropping bombs or tossing bombs onto your target area instead of using this weapon. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and pause here real quick and kind of do the little dogfights thing. our aircraft is here. Our targets are there. Kind of see the little dots there right about the middle of the screen. We got the little town that's down there. We got Mercury off to the right. We have a small little strip of like residential type areas or different colored dirt, and then there's all the little dots down there that are our target area. In order to attack our target, we're going to have to roll on over and execute a shallow dive, get the target there in the pipper, fire the weapon, and then steer the weapon while cruising down towards the ground to keep track of it to guide it. So let's go ahead and get in here and make this happen. Master arm is on. We are set in direct and on AGM-12. We are starting with the right outer pylon, which should be the A model of the weapon. And here we go. Coming up on about 3 miles. Rifle. You see that smoke mortar and the flare.
Right, 55 degrees, 13 miles, 13,500. Negative IFF.
We did manage to hit the targets there. But as you can see, we had that big plumage missile trail off the back of it. And we did have to fly more or less kind of straight in on it. We're going to go ahead and briefly extend here a little bit. And give ourselves a little more altitude.
We have a new bogey. Left 35 degrees, 18 miles, 14,500.
All right, we're going to try this again.
Negative IFF. That target is an enemy.
Looks like one of the A4s might have violated Groom's airspace. Which is bad for those AI. They've not done that before, so. One of the little uglier things that I have happen over here in Groom Lakeville is if you do violate the airspace that's there, an emission set for 1979, or 75-ish rather, there's some very, very, very modern equipment that violently defends that airspace. That's interesting. We actually caught one of the SA-10s as it's throwing a telephone pole out of the tube. That's fun. Oh, they're not shooting at me. They're shooting at some Skyhawks that are in the area.
Nine o'clock, we've got mud. 9 o'clock. SA-10 and mud. 7 o'clock. SA-10.
We're going to continue on as if none of that is going on there. And we're going to use the bigger warhead version next. The AGM-12C. Same sort of deal. I do want more altitude so I can look down on the target and guide the weapon, hopefully, to being able to hit kind of in the middle of everything. That should be enough. Roll on over. I'm going to aim at that large group there on just above the Pipper. Well, below it now. Rifle. A little bit better result, I would say. Several destroyed vehicles, several damaged vehicles. I'll try and reattack the diamond next. Go ahead and change pylons. Okay, back towards the target area. And again, we're going to attack this diamond here on the right. A little higher than what I need to do, and rifle. And we're steering. And we're steering. There we go. All you're basically doing is watching the back of that flare and trying to overlap the flare with the weapon. There's not a whole lot else to it. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and land at Creech. I've got plenty of gas on board the jet, so I'm not going to do a refuel. But I will make sure to grab some rockets, and we'll talk briefly about how things are a little different for the rockets compared to some of the other systems. And since we're already more or less lined up with the runway, rather than push in and do like an overhead brake, we're just going to go straight in for it. For those watching at home though, the overhead brake pattern for a runway landing is very similar to a Case 1 approach for an aircraft carrier. And flown right, it will put you lined up where you need to be on speed on AOA just about every time.
Already gear, flaps, pressure, warning lights, anti-skid.
Jester, as usual, and as is in tradition, is very quick to judge me for what he believes to be a bad landing. And very slow to praise one that is smooth. We'll stop here for a minute. And we're going to change our loadout to a handful of rockets. A handful of rockets. A handful of rockets. Just a few rockets. And several rockets.
Request refueling.
Oh, we got coffee here this morning, Chief. One of the Christmas presents I got here this year was a coffee machine specifically to put in the office.
Refueling complete.
So I don't have to walk quite so far anymore. Grab myself a cup of coffee when I'm flying or doing this. Alright, so while they're putting things on the jet, we're going to talk about the rockets. These are again used on the direct weapon selector for rockets and dispensers, which is the top position there for the weapon selector. Now, these two panels here for the interval and the quantity do matter a great deal more for the rocket pods than it does with any of the other weapons that we've been using here lately.
Rearming complete.
As it is with the bombs, where you have the interval between impulses in seconds, that applies to the rockets too. So the longer the interval, the longer the distance is between impulses of rocket fire. You can kind of use that to help yourself limit how many rockets you're putting downrange. So if you're on a protracted mission where you got a lot of targets that you're looking to try and pepper with some rocket fire, you might consider a longer impulse time so that you can manually work the trigger to make things happen. The shorter the impulse time, the faster the rockets are going to fly out from the tubes. For most of my rocket work, I tend to go with somewhere between 0.8 and 0.12, 0.08 and 0.12 milliseconds between impulses. You can also use the quantity selector to accomplish the same result. If you set it to 4, it will only fire 4 rockets at a time. If you set it to 18, it will shoot 18 rockets at a time. It will attempt to alternate pylons and balance things out for you. But there are a few other selectors which are, functionally the same as if you're dropping bombs. But for the rockets, it's something else to consider as options. For C, that is a continuous mode. As long as you are holding the pickle button down, it will continue to shoot 1 rocket per impulse and alternate pylons all over the place until you're done. If you set it on P, it will fire a rocket from each of the pylons in sequence. The fun switch, though, is when you put it on S for salvo mode, because what it will do is it will fire rockets from every pod and from every subpod, or from every pylon and from every subpod on the pylon at the same time. So if you were looking to just do a hellacious barrage, S is where you want to be for salvo. So we're going to put it on S. We're going to use the fun switch today. Actually, it's not true. I'm going to start with one of the slower impulses so you can see how this plays out. And I'm going to exaggerate it a bit by dragging the impulse all the way up to like 0.35 seconds. We're going to select all pylons. And I'm going to start with the interval selector set on 4. So what we will do is we'll take off from Creech. We will go back to our adversary. Yeah, S does not mean single, it means salvo, which tends to confuse some folks. P is 1 per selected pylon, so if you only want to shoot from one pylon, you can just select one pylon and go from there. And then C is continuous, which is all the pylons you got selected, it will keep, giving impulses to that pylon until it's empty. And then any of the numbers is that many per trigger pull, as long as you're holding the button down for the longer ones. Because you can interrupt an 18 drop or an 18 release if you don't hold the pickle button down until all 18 weapons have cleared the aircraft. Basically what you're doing is you're giving the aircraft's minimal weapons computer permission to go ahead and use the weapons for that many impulses, which is also why, if you're going to be dropping things like laser guided bombs or whatever, it's a good habit to always fuss with your quantity selector and make sure it's set on 1. Even if the weapon system may not cause problems, for example, the Maclus guided weapons we've been using today with the Bullpup, where it will only shoot one at a time because you can only ever guide one at a time. It's just good habit and it's good practice to actually work that quantity selector.
He's coming alive. 80 knots. 100 knots. We've got nails, 9 o'clock.
Alright, while we're climbing out here, I'm just going to go ahead and quickly turn the lights off. If for some reason with your rockets you desperately want an extremely long interval, which, I'm not going to judge you. There's probably a reason for doing so at some point, whether it's for cinematics or something else. You can use the interval times 10 selector to extend that interval out even further. That said, rockets are kind of a volume industry. So, I don't know why you would do that, but the option is at least there. We got another ad break coming up here in about 50 seconds or so. We're just going to be cruising out towards our target area. If for whatever reason that ad break isn't finished, I will go ahead and take a short pause just before we get into engage. That way folks can see the long interval there version there with the rockets before we come back and really run over the place with the fun switch. We are carrying several rockets on board. All of them are the Mark V heat variant.
Heads up, nails 5 o'clock. And nails 5 o'clock. Got a new bogey, right 40, 24 miles, 13,000. Good IFF, friendly. Okay, that's a new bogey, right 10 degrees, 37 miles, 1,800.
That's fair, Chief.
No, not getting any IFF here.
All right, so we got about 20 seconds or so here. We're just going to go ahead and set ourselves up in the dogfight special. There's a small part of me that giggles at the thought of having enough post-processing things in the moment to be able to do the whole like partial screen dither and then the little zoom in box and the arrows and everything else. All right, so here we are. Our F4 is here. Our adversaries, those truck parks and everything else, are down there. We're going to roll in. We're going to drop 4 rockets on them in the first pass with the long interval, so just so you can see how that's going to work. And then we're going to come back in. We're just going to dump rockets over the whole damn area in salvo mode on a much faster impulse, so you can see how that plays out. So let's have some fun with it. Throttles up here a little bit. Let's get a little bit more altitude. Accuracy with the rockets is really kind of dependent upon the pilot's interpretation about how any of this works. That said, I'm using a pipper setting of about 23 degrees, or 25 mils rather. We're going to aim for the circle here. And darts. Gave us that impulse of 4. Looks like we did actually hit something. And damaged it a little bit. So that was stellar, right? That was exciting. We can all look at that and feel the movement of the Spirit. Nice little piff, 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 piff. Very exciting. I didn't think it was. I'm working the selector slider over. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and use it in direct. Rather than DT, but it is an option to use dive toss mode for it. Target here is masked a little bit by this cloud. But moisture and airborne condensation is not going to save these trucks.
Heads up, new bogey. Left 35, 18 miles, 15,000. IFF is good. That's a friendly.
Coming back in on the same target. Isn't that better? You know, I don't think we're done yet. All right. Rolling back in, picking up some speed. What do 150 rockets say to the gas? No. Dial it up, make it a little quicker. Probably got like one good salvo left in us there. Alright, they're all dead, they're all dead.
We have a new bogey.
Somehow these guys aren't.
29 miles, 6,000. It's a friend. IFF checks out.
Yeah, no, I think we can do that, Chief. That should be fine. We'll go back to Creech real quick and we'll grab the extra gun pods. And we'll close the teaching segment of the stream out with some of that. We still have a handful of trucks down that way. Going safer weapons here. Leave the guns in low rate for now. I will pick up some extra gas here for this trip, but we won't go to the full tank there. Same thing, we're just going to come in more or less straight on for Creech. And then we'll see what we can do about wiping out those last vehicles.
What's our fuel looking like?
I think our fuel's looking fine, Jester. You should probably not ask questions while I'm coming into land. I've got 4,000 pounds in an airbase less than 3 miles away. I think we'll make it.
And gear, flaps, pressure, warning lights, anti-skid.
Little off center, but we'll see if we can't straighten that out before touchdown.
Your landing today was as sweet as PB&J.
You know, I get where he's going with that one, because PB&J sandwiches are very solid all around. But there's nothing sweet about peanut butter. Same thing, we're going to taxi off here. Cross the active, the whole short line rather, and give the imaginary plane people a parachute to catch. Alright, let's go ahead and get ourselves equipped to play with the gun pod. Su-23 gun pod is a nice addition for the aircraft, in that it is actually aligned with the Pipper as compared to previous iterations of the gun pod, like the Su-16, that were not. They weren't bore-sighted or aligned with anything.
Request refueling.
Especially in the early days of the Phantom A, B, and C variants with the Air Force and the Navy, where it had no internal gun. The F-4E was the first Phantom variant that had an internal nose gun. That was really all you were going to get if you were going to be using guns at all, was a gun pod of some kind of as a stopgap measure, because we thought that missiles were going to be it. You know, at no point would aircraft engage in actual dogfighting or anything remotely along those lines. Yep, yeah, it's also very compatible with the radar gun Pipper, which is helpful. So the old Su-16 was not only not aligned with the Pipper or the radar in any way, shape, fashion, or form, but it also relied on a ram air turbine to spin the gun up, which meant that below certain airspeeds the gun wouldn't even spool, and at other airspeeds it would spool, but not to maximum rate, so you wouldn't get the fastest firing capabilities out of the weapon. The Su-23 pod that we're using uses an internal electrical system to spool the gun up and take care of all of that, so we can get all of the select fire rates that we want out of it, just like we would use if we were using the gun in the nose. Still fires the same 20mm projectile, but the gun pod is supposed to have 1,200 rounds in the pod per gun, as compared to about 630 or so internally for the nose gun. You could use it in air-to-air if you really wanted to, but they're more designed or suitable for ground strafing for targets. In the earlier days with the older gun pod, when that was the only option for air-to-air combat, the gun was really only bore-sighted to be mostly sort of center until the first trigger pull or the first high G maneuver, at which point it kind of shifted on its rail some and was no longer aligned. So, hair-raising time before they put an internally mounted 20mm autocannon in the jet. And of course, the gun of choice is one that we've been using for a very long time, the Vulcan cannon in one variant or another, which first saw use on the F-104 and the F-105. And continues to be used in one variant or another to this day. I believe they have a lighter weight version that they put in some aircraft. But the M61A1 has been kind of a staple standard for most jets. Alright, loaded up with about 80% fuel, puts us at just under 10,000 pounds. A note for refueling the F-4, which we've talked about briefly in previous educational streams here. Up to about 10,300 pounds, the fueling system for the F-4 is extremely quick. But once you get to that last 18 to 20% or so, above 10,300 pounds, it is extremely slow. Whatever that last tank is that it's filling probably you know, maybe not a feed tank, but maybe one of the other, you know, main reserves or something along those lines, takes it forever to refuel. The perception that I'm feeling that I get from it is that it is as quick to refuel from 1,000 pounds to 10,000 pounds as it is to go from 10,000 to 12,000 pounds. Alright, so here we are. We're armed with our 3 gun pods. They can be carried on the center line or the outer wing pylons. So whatever your mission is, you can kind of plan for that. You can shoot all 3 gun pods together with the nose gun, which since we're already an hour into today's flight and lesson, that's what we're going to go ahead and do before we jump onto the server and fly with the folks for a little while. Yeah, we'll see if it lists it that way. $234 doesn't sound right. Like at all. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that is wrong one way or the other. We'll see what it is, because I've got full rounds in the internal gun, and if I'm shooting all 4 of them at the same time, if they run out together, we'll know. And if they run out first, we'll know. One of the things that I've always liked about DCS is that it's as much a study level sim as it is a screw around and find out kind of sim. See what it is they've modeled, what hasn't been modeled, try and figure out whose fault it is. But you know, since it's a pylon or a weapon system, we can blame ED for that. They're the ones taking care of all those things. If it was Heapler, it would have been done right the first time. Which, you know, while we're taxiing back here to the runway, for those who don't know or aren't familiar with it, while third-party developers are responsible for the aircraft and they will design weapons for the jet internally for their own testing, when it comes to the actual weapons that are included in the game, ED took that over not long after the development of the JF-17 and its weapon systems. Prior to that, the developers had their own take on that, but in an effort to try and standardize things, which sounds good on paper, they took over control of all of the pods, attachments, weapons, anything you can put on a rearm page is in ED's wheelhouse for design and development. The advantage of that one is at least it's standardized. You know, like, there's not going to be, oh, well, you know, I'm using this F-15E Sparrow, which is different than every other Sparrow in the game. You know, or something similar, you know, because so many of these weapons and equipment and everything else are shared between aircraft.
80 knots. 101.
However, the biggest disadvantage with that is that it's Eagle Dynamics doing it.
103. I'm just kidding. Nails 8 o'clock.
And if they are not quick on the draw on making things happen for brand new weapon systems, like there's no GBU-15 in the game yet. But we've got 2 aircraft, the F-4 and the F-15E, which could employ it. But it's not available. Rather, it's not available for players to use. Other types of weapons that are very similar to ones that are already in the game, like the GBU-24 and some of its other derivatives, like the GBU-27 or 28. Available for the AI, not available for the planes to use. So we're kind of at ED's mercy to make those things happen. Okay, so while we're going back to fly and deal with our nemesis for a third time today, we are in dispensers and rockets mode. But the other requirement is that you have to have your air-to-air weapon selector in gun in order to activate the gun pods. They are fired with the front trigger rather than the pickle button. And I believe that you can use them either in off or direct mode. I don't think either one of those matters. And just so I can get a floating pipper for air to ground, I'm going to go ahead and use DT mode. And we're just going to cruise out the 13 miles to go shoot up these trucks. And we'll call the teaching part of the day a day. Once we're done here, we'll return to Nellis Air Force Base and land where we started, because I like complete sorties. Maybe it is in some part neuroses, maybe it is in some part a point of pride, but I do like having full sorties that end where we started. But yeah, in recent patches, the Hobos bomb, the GB-8 that Chief is talking about there in chat, was one that was originally designed by ED, or not ED rather, by Heapler, that ED then had to go back and fix, which temporarily broke the bomb until they had another hotfix patch come out to deal with it. Which I can definitely tell our alignment is off here now. Let's go strafe some trucks. Looks like we've got just a couple of them left, judging by the lighter smoke trails compared to the blown out vehicles. We've also got some there to the left in that circular setup and a couple of singles that are around. It should be good. Coming in. We're in DT mode, so we got the radar alignment for the Pipper. And guns.
And nails. Heads up, nails. 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock.
Let's go and engage high rate. Guns. Alright, the nose gun is done. It is empty, as it is no longer armed, but my 3 pylons are. And come by, we're going to see if we can strafe the 2 singles. These are a couple of single vehicle groups out there. Set it back to low rate. There's our first one. Yeah, we'll put it in direct. See if that's a little easier. I mean, it's a gun too, so it's more or less like aim at the tracers when you're strafing the ground. Paper's a great deal more of a suggestion than anything else. Alright, here we go. Let's take a good look, see what's left. Maybe we can actually finish this whole objective out. The 2 singles are dead. Looks like I got 1 truck left in the circle. And that's about it. And guns. Click, click. Which is about right. That's about all that I expected to have left. Alright, let's go ahead and set our TACAM back up for 12 X-ray. Set our navigational steering there to TACAM. And we'll bring it on home. You can, with the storage jettison, get rid of the pylons, which will take the pods out there with them. They're not hard fixed to the aircraft. So if you need to get rid of them for weights purposes or what have you, you can do so. Using the gun pods is a lot of fun. They do seem to be a little bit better about penetrating light-skinned vehicles. Like I've killed up to a BMP with them. So something to keep in mind there for employing those, but they are much better against, you know, soft targets. Or making an aircraft think twice in a gunfight, and that would probably work too. But for now, we will go ahead and we'll bring this back to Nellis. We will pop up the TAC view. And we'll do a quick review on the TAC view of our flight today, focusing on the AGM-12 Bullpup use, and you can kind of see how that missile got steered. And see the wall of gunfire. About 30 miles back to Vegas at Nellis Air Force Base. Let's go ahead and bump up our time compression here, and we'll come in to land. Yeah, having about twice the explosive oomph for the Bullpup C compared to the A or B variants is very nice. Functionally, the only difference between the A and B variant is that the A uses a solid propellant and the B uses a liquid propellant, and the B, in theory, has a little bit more range than the A. But functionally speaking, you're trying to follow a flare with your eyes to drag the flare on top of the target. And you need to be able to see it. And if you can't see it, there's not much point. All right, so our final dogfights moment here of the day. Our airplane is here. Nellis Air Force Base is there. In order to come down and land safely, our pilot's going to have to fly out and turn back around to land on 2-1 right. That show is a definite childhood memory that lives free reign in the brain box. I say childhood like it wasn't like my late teens or early 20s. Yeah, I think is it the Robot 5? So I think the 4 is an anti-ship missile. I think the Robot 5 is the MACLOS version. No, he's been fussing around with them a little bit, and it's mostly just a matter of getting everything all bound in the right way to make it work. That and using the computer to do the offset bombing and everything else has been kind of his area of practice recently. Okay, let's see if Jester's either going to be insulted by my landing because he believes it's much too firm, or if he's going to tell me that's prettier than Meg Ryan.
Alrighty, gear, flaps, pressure, warning lights, anti-skid. $500.
Jester, I've got a radar altimeter. We're definitely not 500 feet up.
$300. That was pretty good, man.
If I'm going to be doing a lot of training sorties here at Nellis, I might add some extra life and flavor to the base, including some little carts and infantry for the people who come out here to pick up the parachutes. And since home means Nevada to me, let's go ahead and turn the air conditioning on.
Roger. Wheel chocks in. Roger. Done.
All right, folks, let's go take a look at the TAC view and we will review our flight. It's authentic except for the last 4 seconds because I'm still technically in the mission. But for those who haven't used it before, haven't seen the channel, TacView is a free program that you can pay for a little bit of extra features and such as better zoom and all that. But what it does is it gathers telemetry information from DCS and a few other games like Falcon BMS and IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad, that kind of thing. Or Battle of BOX, rather, is what they do lately. And it converts that into things that you can see and interact with. And you can kind of view a lot of different things, not just about your own jet, but about what's going on in the area around you. Some of that is subject to what the server allows for exported telemetry data, because it is something that, especially on a PvP server, if they allow TacView at all for flight reviews, which in most cases they should, they attach like a 10-minute delay to it. So you really can't watch a live version while you are in the server, and if you disconnect, you're going to miss the last 10 minutes of whatever the flight was. But for our purposes here, it's going to show everything in real time, which is very useful, and I use it all the time for my own flight assessment for things that went wrong, like, oh man, I just spontaneously combusted here. What happened there? Well, you know, I wasn't paying attention, and I got shot by a MiG-21 that decided to go ahead and cruise in behind me and hit me with a heater when I wasn't looking. You know, things like that, it will show you, absolutely. But it also shows like G-load on the aircraft, so you can take a look at it and go, well, what happened here? I was in the Tomcat and I was doing, you know, Mach 1.3 down on the deck, and I just pulled back on the stick and my aircraft disintegrated. Well, yeah, you broke the wings in the jet, so you died. You know, things like that. It will show you those kinds of things. So with that, let's go ahead and review our flight from today and recap our lessons, and then we'll close things out and go jump on the server and have some fun. So we took off from Nellis, and we're just going to go ahead and fast forward on over towards our unattended target area, which is out here. We can see our, it's being a little stuttery. I think I'm actually going to close DCS as a background process here. So we can smooth this out a little bit. But we can see our target area with the diamond shape arrangement of trucks over here, the circular arrangement of trucks over here. No, the large diamond is here, the two singles are here, the smaller diamond is over there. And we can zoom in on those and you can see that a little more clearly. And there's our F-4. Since I am the host, it will show additional information because it gets more telemetry from me than it does from other players. But if there were other players in the room, you could see their G-loading, their weapons usage, where they're at, that kind of thing. But you also get this teal line here with the cross on the end, which is roughly the center of my head tracking. It doesn't always align that way, but if I was to go into the pilot's view, you can see that's the HUD glass of the F-4, and roughly the center of my vision is about where the radar display normally rides. But as I do things like look out the window, check the weapons selector, all that kind of stuff, that head tracking will move with it. So we cruised into the area, and we picked our nose up, rolled on over, descended down. And at this point, we're trying to look through the gun sight. And here goes our first Bullpup A. And I'm steering it at this point, so it's kind of doing some what looks like weird nonsense as I'm just trying to guide it into the target area. And it's close enough to damage one of the targets, but not kill it, because it's a small weapon. But we go ahead and we turn back around, and we fire the opposite pylon on which I put the AGM-12B. Same thing, you can see that missile kind of wobble as I take command of it. And I am just trying to put the little flare roughly over the top of the target. And it overshoots and damages but doesn't kill anything either. So now we got the big boys. The nose up, roll on over. And my target group this time is this group. And of course it tumbles in and takes out a larger portion. I also hit much closer to where it needed to go. Come up, back, and around. So yeah, again, we're trying to use the hand control unit while staring at the flare. Trying to guide the weapon to the target. Back here a little bit, kind of look over my own shoulder. Yeah, I use an axis for mine, which I very, very strongly recommend if you have the room to bind that hand control unit to an axis and fine tune it. You know, put some curves on it, make it feel comfortable, that way you can get some proportional guidance out of the weapon. Because if you're just using a hat or buttons to make this happen, you're basically doing full deflection on the control surfaces. So you're not going to get that fine quality steering out of it. It's just going to be, you know, maximum left, maximum right. Very similar to like a GPU 10 or 12 or 16. And its control surfaces trying to go in and hit the target. Okay, so we land, we come back up. This is our rocket pass now. And remember, I dialed the selector up initially to about 0.35 to 0.4 second impulses, and I set our weapon release counter to 4. So it was only going to fire 4 rockets at that longer release pattern. And I believe we came in on the circular group here on this one. You can also just hit play and watch this in real time, but there they are, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we hit and damaged the target. And then we come back and we dial the selector switch to a much faster speed and change the pylon or the weapon pylon selector as far as our quantities to S for salvo, which fired 1 from every tube on the jet at that faster impulse. Gave it a burst. And we damaged everything and destroyed a couple. Flip back over. Threw more rockets downrange. And this one we had just a tiny burst left. So we gave it the gun. All right, so then we come back, we get our gun pods, we come back up. And we fired 1,200 rounds in this first burst between the nose gun and all 3 pylons. Just absolutely pissing bullets. And wiped out the rest of that group. Rolled back around. Rolled through that group. Didn't quite roll through the other trucks there like I wanted, but we did damage one of them. Picked the nose up, rolled out. Came back down. I thought there was something still alive here, so that's kind of a wasted burst. I was like, okay, maybe we can actually finish this thing. Quick Burt. Killed that truck. Killed that truck. Damaged that truck, and at that point we're out of gun food. So all in all, from our attack on this practice unattended depot that I've got set up, which is why I have objectives like this, because when you're going up to fly and you're going up to practice either a new skill or to refine an old skill, it is best to take it in stages. This is just Pilum's advice corner here on this one now. The first stage that I will generally do is, can I get a weapon off the jet? Especially if it's unfamiliar. You know, what do I need to be able to come down here and do this? In this unattended depot, none of these vehicles shoot back. I can make as many passes, low and close, high and far, you know, whatever it is I need to do in order to show that I can get weapons off the jet. Then I can refine my aim. I can see how these things work. I can destroy clusters of targets. And once I get that sort of skill firmly implanted into the brain, then I can move up. I can move up to other targets, like this very adjacent zone to our target depot range, which at the moment I have AI A4s just attacking, you know, for flavor, that kind of deal. But there is an SA-8 down here. There's a fire can radar system down here. There are Shulkas down here. There are Sparkas down here. There are things that can absolutely destroy my aircraft here if I'm not paying attention. So move up in stages. It doesn't matter if you're doing air to ground or if you're doing air to air. If you're doing air to air, my recommendation generally is to start with, pick a weapon system. I'm going to go up and I want to get a weapon off the rail to engage a target. Okay, cool. Well, what am I going to fight? Fight an IL-76 Candid. Fight a giant aircraft that is a huge radar return, that is a huge aircraft visually to see, that's got 4 smoky engines that you can trail from a long distance off. It's a target that you can absolutely pound with guns for several bursts, and you may not take it down in the first one. And it doesn't shoot back. Start with, can I get a weapon off the jet? Can I hit my target? Then you can move up to something like a MiG-19 or a MiG-23. The reason why I recommend both of those aircraft, the 19 only has a couple of air-to-air missiles, and they are bad. They're basically Russian copies of an AIM-9B, which has a very narrow forward seeker head, not very fast, and somewhat easy to defeat. But it's still a missile. The MiG-19 also seems to play a little better and a little nicer than the MiG-21 or the MiG-15. So, always good options there. The MiG-23 utilizes, on paper, the same AI flight model that any of the other aircraft have, but the staple aircraft for DCS, for the AI, seem to behave better under it and a little more realistically. You know, it is possible to get very quickly behind a MiG-25 or a MiG-23 or even a MiG-31 because they seem to respect their G limits more than third-party aircraft like the MiG-21 or some of the others, utilizing the simplified flight model. But move your way up to aircraft that can genuinely attack and kill you from a distance. Practice until you get those things right, until you feel comfortable and cozy. But especially if you're learning something brand new, a few things are more frustrating than trying to get in and learn a new skill and getting yourself killed over and over again on account of, you know, you're just trying to learn how the system works and you keep flying into a threat envelope where something gets you killed. It is this A4. I got entirely too close to Groom Lake. No, it's not that A4. That A4. It's this A4. So yeah, I've got an unattended depot here that can't shoot back. It lets me kind of fly over whatever, but there are also multiple target zones on this mission that I've constructed and multiple missions that I can call in just in general that aren't populated on server start to really practice with all of the different weapon systems available. And I encourage folks to do things like that when they are learning rather than jumping up on a multiplayer server and, an actual mission is being flown by a bunch of folks and you're just ham-fisting controls trying to learn something new literally in the moment in the zone. So always good to start that way and then move up. With that though, folks, we're going to go ahead and close things out as we usually do for this segment of the stream, and then I will jump on the server and restart the stream to play for about another hour or so, just so I can keep the teaching segment separate from the playing and have fun segment. And we're going to go from there. But yep, TAC view, Bullpup, bunch of good stuff. Let's go ahead and flip on over. Appreciate folks watching, coming to play, coming to learn. Saturdays is where I'm going to be doing Pilum Teaches DCS as an official thing from now on. And that starts at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard and eventually Pacific Daylight Time. We have covered practically every system on board the F-4E, so we will either move on to a different aircraft as Pilum tries to get familiar with how carrier operations work again in light of some of the new upgrades there, and we'll take time with the F-14. Or, we might just continue refining things with the F-4, we might take the F-15 up. I don't know what I'm going to start with next week, but we have definitely covered the Phantom nose to tail and back again. So maybe we'll even focus a little bit air to air with the Phantom. That might be fun. We'll do some things with that. So I appreciate all the follows, all the subscribes. Those things definitely help. They keep things moving forward. And I'm very grateful to all of that. If you choose to go ahead and spend your free Amazon Prime Twitch subscription here, I will happily take Bezos dollars on account of that. That's good stuff. If that's not your thing, you prefer to donate or tip directly, you can do that at coffee.com/PilumJRomar. I have had a couple of cups of coffee already, so I do spend that money on coffee stuff, if you choose to give it that way. You can catch this and other VODs on the YouTube channel and at PilumRomar. Our usual weekly schedule that we've got right now is Monday coming up. We have DCS Monday at 6 p.m. and Classic Games at 9 p.m. I'm going to try and stream Pretense on that one, which is the game mode that we've been flying with the boys here lately. However, as labor-intensive as that one is and as stuttery as that one can get, that may not be the best for stream. We'll see how that one plays. We're going to follow that up with Classic Games time at 9 p.m., more like 8:30 most of the time. It really kind of depends on whether or not I can get that last sortie in or if I'm going to be interrupted by it by bumping into my next stream time. And that is going to be on Dark Sun 2, continuing our playthrough on that one. Friday night, we've been doing Arma 3. I don't know if we're going to be continuing with the Anastasi campaign. There's been some discussion about that coming to an end, at which point we'll just need to assess where we are with that for Arma. But at the moment, Arma 3 is on the schedule for 6 p.m. on Friday. With that, folks, always ask for consent. Try to communicate as best you can with your partners. Try to be genuinely decent human beings. I will get up and go grab a snack here, Chief, as you have spent the points to do so. And then we will be back for a little bit to do a little bit of streaming on the server and should have a good time with that. So give me about 5 minutes, folks. We will be right back. Take care.